Hello and welcome to the Zwift Race Place. I'm Cade Fravel, and today we're bringing you Zwift Through the Ages, a complete history of Zwift. Alright, let's get into it. I want to start out today with a snapshot of Zwift history, year by year, starting all the way back in 2014. 2014 starts off with a bang as the first ever Zwift ride is logged by John Mayfield, lead game designer at Zwift. And Zwift moves into beta testing, introducing the first riders to the platform, one of which we'll get a chance to hear from in just a few minutes. Jumping right into 2015 now, Zwift launches to the public in October of this year with only two worlds, Watopia and Richmond. Later in the year, we see the introduction of some popular new media outlets focused entirely on Zwift, such as Zwift Insider and the Zwiftcast, which are both founded this year. Although Zwift has only been available to the public for a few months at this point in time, we already see Zwift's first expansion, the addition of Ocean Boulevard to Watopia. 2016 brings a lot of new features on Zwift, including the addition of the Epic KOM and Radio Tower climbs, and the release of the London map. We also see one of the first up-and-coming race series become popular this year, the Friday Criterion race series, which still runs today and has since grown into the Team TFC. Zwift finishes out the year strong with its release on iOS in December of 2016, making the platform available to even more riders. 2017 is an important year in Zwift history, with many of Zwift's most prominent features starting to emerge. This year, we see the addition of Run Mode on Zwift, followed up by the first group run and more support for Zwift events than we had previously seen. Zwift also releases a couple of new roads, including the Mayan Jungle, the Volcano, and some new roads in London. Once again, Zwift finishes out the year strong with a new release, this time on Apple TV. 2018 is a good year for the climbers and the restless, because Zwift rolls out all sorts of new roads this year, most of them hilly. We have the addition of Keith and Leith Hill in London, the futuristic world of New York City where you always feel like you're going up or down, the new Innsbruck world complete with an alpine climb, and the crowning climb of them all, Alpe du Zwift is added to Watopia, modeled after the iconic real-life climb Alpe d'Huez. 2019 officially brings us into the modern era in Zwift history, as we start to see many of the smaller features that still remain in place today. Avatar customization junkies are thrilled right off the bat as Zwift releases the drop shop in late February. After that, we see mostly a series of small additions to the ever-growing platform. These smaller expansions and worlds include, in order of release, Fuego Flats, the Bologna TT World, Titans Grove, the 2019 UCI World's Harrogate World, and Crit City. As you can see, Zwift was clearly geared towards expansion this year as opposed to introducing new features. 2020 is what I like to call the year of racing, because that's exactly what happened on Zwift this year. The virtual Tour de France, which is arguably the highest level race to ever take place on Zwift, starts the frenzy in July, but it's followed up by the Zwift Racing League, Premier and Community divisions that October. And the first ever Zwift World Championships, along with the Zwift Nations Challenge, take place this December. I won't bore you with the details of 2021 because chances are you lived through it. I will tell you though that I think 2021 is on track to become a variety year, where not one category can define the kind of features Zwift releases, and instead we get a little bit of everything. Now we're heading all the way back to where we started on this timeline to learn a little bit more about the early days of Zwift with Greghilton, a Zwifter who was lucky enough to beta test Zwift before its release. Here's an interview that I did with him just a couple days before releasing this video. So, first, do you mind introducing yourself to our viewers and letting us know how long you've been on Zwift?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Greghilton. I live in Leeds in the UK. I've always been into my sports, my technology, my gadgets, and I was lucky enough to be on a Zwift beta. January 2015 was the first time I got on the platform on the 17th of January.
So you were a Zwift beta tester, as you said. So that seems like a cool opportunity. How did that one come about?
There was a guy in my outside world cycling club called Simon Schofield. He might be familiar to you. He runs the Zwiftercast now. So I think he was on the beta very, very early. And I can't remember whether he had a few invites or whether he got an early access link, but I went via that process. I think it was just before Christmas when I applied. And as I said, I was on in January. So my Zwift ID is 2,240, which I'm quite proud of.
So you said you're real life cycling club. So like what were your cycling experiences or other sports experiences prior to Zwift?
Yeah, so I've played, in America you'd call it field hockey, my whole life. So I've always been fairly sporty. When I was a kid, I used to cycle just to get around and go places and go to and from work. I was in a cycling club up to about the age of 18, so that was just going out on a Saturday or a Sunday and doing a club ride. And then I went to university and kind of didn't do anything really until I got to my 40s, started mountain biking, and then I realized you could go an awful lot faster and quicker and further on a road bike, so I switched to road biking and got quite serious with that. Joined a club, Alba Rosa, over here. Did some things like chain gangs and all the kind of stuff that everybody does. Did a huge ride with them, which is called Coast to Coast. You go from one side of the UK to the other in a whole day. So that was 250 kilometers of cycling and about 4,500 meters of climbing. So that was a big day on the saddle. And I got into things like triathlon. I've done a few sprint Olympics and one half distance. So done a bit of everything really.
So back to the beta tester thing, what did being a beta tester actually entail for you? Like, can you explain what the experience was like?
Yeah, I was looking back, I didn't have to do anything. They just wanted people on the platform and using it. And I hate to say it, it was probably pretty stable back in those days because there was so less people on it. There was no issues really, it just worked. But at the time it seemed pretty amazing. But looking back, they had one map and one route. It was 5 kilometers. So if you wanted to ride for an hour, you did that 7 or 8 times, effectively, the same loop over and over again. It was a lot easier to get the Com and the sprint jerseys because there was just hardly anybody on there. If you saw another person, that was quite a big thing, and you'd always give them a ride on or a wave or something. And I just checked actually. So the first loop was called Jarvis Island. And so one of the Strava segments on there has only ever had 5,000 people ride it. And if you compare that to a segment on London, that's probably got 600,000 people have ridden that. So the difference is staggering from the early days.
Yeah, it is a big difference. And speaking of that difference, did you have any idea how big Zwift would become in the future when you were first riding on Zwift in 2014, 2015?
I kind of hoped it would keep going because it was a damn sight more interesting than staring at your garage wall. So, but a lot of my friends were still riding outside and they were going, there's no way this will take off. You know, people prefer to be outside. How can it be sustainable? And quite negative about it at the time. So to see it grow to the, what was it, peak of 50,000 this year, I think is just quite incredible, really. So I had no idea they'd go from a couple of hundred riders to 50,000 on at the same time.
Have your friends who originally said that it wasn't going anywhere, have they since gotten into Zwift?
I've got 4 guys I ride with regularly. 3 of them are now on Zwift. There's 1 left to convert. So.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of a big question, but I know we've been talking about the past a lot. Where do you think Zwift is going in the future?
So I said I'm quite into my technology. So I think I run it on a PC, and I think they're at a bit of a crossroads, really. I think they have to decide, do they stick with the platform as it is, which is quite old code now. It's got 7 years old code, and it's not taking advantage of multi-core CPUs or some of the technologies out there today. So I think they either have to rewrite it in some modern code or they have to just keep patching it and keep it ticking along. So I really hope that they're working secretly on a complete rewrite with modern code. I think that's one thing they need to look at. And you probably see in the forums now, there's more and more people having little issues, like people dropping out or riders around you disappearing. And some of that is down to internet speeds, but I think some of that is down to the core platform as well, struggling as the riders ramp up. And then secondly, the whole issue of sandbagging and cheating in races, I think they've got to do something about that. And you've seen them trying it with a few things like coning people and reducing the wattage down. So I really hope that they start to develop that and take that a bit more seriously as well.
Yeah, I know you mentioned all those little bugs. I know like one of the big ones recently has been people are just ghosting, like disappearing off the map and from the leaderboard, and it's messing with people's races too. Um, so you're saying that it's 7 years old code now. Were there less bugs when you were originally on Zwift? Has it kind of gotten worse in terms of bugs over time?
I think it has. I'm trying to remember. I was flicking back through my Strava feed, and there was no comments about crashing or anything like that I put in any of those rides. But there might only have been 20, 30 people on at any one time. So the load was tiny. And I was running it on an old laptop, and it just ran fine at the time. Yeah. And I guess the pandemic caught them by surprise. They couldn't have anticipated the huge upsurge of people wanting to use it as well. So
Yeah, you mentioned the pandemic, and that kind of perfectly segues into our next question, which is how has the pandemic affected how you have used Zwift?
I've just been on it non-stop. I think over here in the UK, we've been in lockdown almost for a year now. We've come in and out, but we keep going back in. So the very first lockdown was in March last year. And our NHS, which is our health providers and our hospitals, were under a lot of strain. So they were asking people not to go outside your local area. And I thought if I went outside and if I fell off and hit myself and damaged myself, I'd be in trouble and putting extra strain on the hospital. So I just decided to stay inside. And I think I did the whole of my summer riding on Zwift. And like we said earlier, I got into the ZRL racing, and I even did the Rafa 500 purely indoors as well, which I've never done before. So.
All right, so that was just about all of the questions I had for you. Before you go, are there any other interesting facts about the early days of Zwift that you think our viewers might be interested in hearing?
I think it's probably quite hard to imagine now, but in the early days, there was nobody in front of you. You had clear tarmac, and drafting was really hard. And if you found someone, it was a novelty. And I think it's completely the opposite now. It's very hard to find a clear patch of road in Zwift. So it's amazing how it's come around in a couple of years.
A big shout out to Greghilton for that amazing interview. Thanks for all your thoughtful answers, Greg, and best of luck in your upcoming Zwift endeavors. All right, thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed, please remember to subscribe to the Zwift Race Place for more community division coaching tips, general Zwift knowledge, and live race coverage. For more from the Zwift Race Place, click into our community division coaching tips playlist, which will be up on the screen to the left of me, I believe. And that's all pro-level coaching tips from Zwifters just like you. Or check out our video on Zwift from a junior's point of view. We do a great interview with the SDW Youth Squad and talk a little bit more about what it's like to be a junior on Zwift. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Zwift Race Place.